Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Biology Daily Booster. This is number 9 in our series, and it is advanced information listed for those of you doing higher tier biology. Do remember though, that doesn't mean that if you're doing foundation nothing will come up, because as we saw in the first biology paper there were questions on every section of the specification. So worth watching even if you're doing foundation. What we're going to be looking at in this booster is the idea of classification. When we talk about classification in biology, what we're saying is we're going to be sorting living organisms into groups based on similar characteristics. Think of it like a filing system for life on Earth. So rather than just having this weird like hodgepodge of everything in a big pile, we've decided we want to sort it out into nice, easy to sort of use boxes. So we've looked at things, we've said, oh look, you guys all have wings, in you go to this little box here. That's what classification is, just sorting things based on similar characteristics. The reason that we want to classify organisms, firstly, allows us to identify species. Secondly, we can predict characteristics of other species within that similar grouping. And finally, it shows us evolutionary links, so we can see how all of these different organisms here on planet Earth link together. A definition that we should learn: species, a group of organisms which are able to reproduce to produce fertile offspring. So what we've got here, they need to be able to reproduce together and produce fertile offspring. So 2 points: the organisms can reproduce, first point, and the offspring are fertile, second point. Stick it on the flashcard, species one side, definition on the other, make sure you know it. When it comes to classifying, what we're going to use are 7 taxonomic levels. So taxonomic levels are basically groups of classification. You need to learn the correct order for these. Now, there are little acronyms that you can make up for yourself using obviously the first letter of each of those words to help you remember it. I hope you've got one that works for you. But the largest of all the taxonomic levels, so the one with the most organisms in it that are the most different from one another, is the kingdom. So kingdom is our first classification, then the phylum, class, order, family, genus, and when we get down to species, that is an individual organism. So species is where there's only one, and as we then move further up towards the kingdom, obviously more and more species are put together there. We've got 5 kingdoms that everything is classified into: plants, animals, fungi, protoctista, prokaryotes. So everything fits into one of those 5 kingdoms first of all. So if you think about what goes into animals, that's got us, dogs, spiders, fish. Don't know about you, but I don't really feel like I have much affinity with a spider. So what we find is the kingdom is very diverse, so wide-ranging, lots of different characteristics in there. But as we go further down those taxonomic levels, the organisms there get more similar to one another, until finally, species, just the one. In terms of how we classify them, there are 2 systems that we could use. The first system is called the artificial classification system. Now this one just uses the characteristics we can see, the observable characteristics. So there's no consideration of evolutionary relationships. We're literally sitting there looking at the organisms and going, you've got wings, into one group you go. You don't have wings, you're not in that same group. So literally looking at the observable characteristics, we divide them up into their groups. There are some problems with this, and we've got a little picture of a little problematic creature at the bottom there, because if we look at it, you might be sitting there thinking, well, okay, where does it go? Because if we think about groups we know, then you might be looking thinking, well look, right there, we have wings. Feet look kind of like a bird as well, so surely it goes in with the birds. However, if we look at that head there, don't know many birds that look like that at all. That to me said it looks more like the reptiles. So does it go into birds? Does it go in with the reptiles? Problem. So that's why the artificial classification system isn't always great, because the observable characteristics don't always allow us to fit it perfectly into one of those groups. We have the second option of the natural classification system. Now, this is based on evolutionary relationships, and the way we've worked out those evolutionary relationships is through analysing the DNA of all these different species. So once we analyse the DNA, what we're really doing is having a look how similar those DNA sequences are. If they're very similar to one another, that means that those two species are actually very similar to each other. So they must have a common ancestor in the recent past. And we build up this kind of family tree, if you like, of these little links between the different species. So what we've got at the bottom here, this is our little evolutionary tree showing us humans. So if we have a little look, that one there is Homo sapiens, so that is modern humans. And we then can see the other one that's most closely related to us is Neanderthals. So what we can see, this little point here is where we actually branched away from each other. So we have a common ancestor there that meant these two different species then came into existence. Obviously Neanderthals have died off, now just us, we take over the world, yay us. As we go further and further back through time, we can see that eventually we come to a point down here where there is a common ancestor between us as modern day humans and a chimpanzee. So we are not descended from chimpanzees, okay? It's not like chimpanzees that we know today just randomly mutated and became us. Instead, chimpanzees that we know today and us as modern humans evolved from the same common ancestor many millions of years ago. So that's how we build this up. And when we're studying these evolutionary links, that is what we refer to as phylogeny. If there are bits from today's booster that you'd like to look at in a bit more detail, head on over to the main channel and look at the videos in the V5 playlist. Obviously you can use your revision guide as well, and I do always recommend looking at some past exam questions before your exam, just to get a feel for the style of question and what they're looking for by using the mark scheme as well. Don't forget to join us again tomorrow for our next biology booster.